Hello and welcome to Boat Talk, where we talk about all the ings of boats.
Repowering.
Building. Operating. And this week, buying.
Buying a boat. Buying a boat.
You got to be a little crazy to buy a boat.
They say the best day is the day you buy, and then the day you...
The two best days of your life.
Yeah.
The day you bought a boat and the day you sold the boat.
So true. So true.
We are your hosts. Between us, we have more than 20 years experience working here at Seaboard Marine alongside Tony Athens. This is Corey Schmidt, the VP of Operations, and I'm Justin Riggy, the VP of Engineering. These days, we just get too many calls to do this all, to answer every single question one by one on the phone. So we thought we'd start this podcast and answer the questions for you all to hear. Before we get into our calls, I was thinking we might do our second installment of how we got to now. And I thought it'd be good to talk about Tony Athens and Seaboard Marine and the internet. Because when I first met Tony, it was back in the 90s. He was the first person I ever knew that had a website. He had a website, I believe it was sbmar.com.
It was sbmar.com.
In like 96 or 7, something like that.
These are the AOL days, and you're
Yeah.
dial up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and he was active on the forums, the old boat diesel. And
Yeah, when Boat Diesel was around, Tony was, I would say, the absolute, well, you consider him now in forum talk, he was the moderator.
Right.
But I would say it's more appropriate to call him the top contributor.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the mainstay on Boat Diesel for over a decade at least, right? And he was super just quintessential in providing all this information that he had based on all these years of experience, and he was able to help all these people on this forum. It's the beauty of the internet back in the day, to be able to get all that information out to all these people. And he really had this groundswell of other contributors, people that were engaging and learning, and all of that information started to propagate.
Yeah.
And what a beautiful thing, because you not only do you build a community, but now people you don't have to field 1,800 phone calls to answer a question. It's just readily accessible and readily available. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
yeah. And so he had a website and he listed some parts and maybe some things, but it was mainly just you kind of call in and, hey, you got a part for my 6BT or whatever, right? And then you came on the scene and you guys went to the, what do we call, e-commerce.
Yeah, when I first joined the show with Tony, there was a little bit of a parts business, but I think there was a little bit more demand, and I don't think we had the capacity to handle it. So my bright idea was hey, let's create a website that not only has all this information that Tony's put out there, let's put it out there, make sure it's easy to navigate and search and index for free.
Yeah.
And then if people want to buy parts, let's try to sell them parts in an easy way. Right. Sometimes it's nice to be able to call in and say, hey, I need a part, this and that. But we grew out of that very quickly.
Right.
You can't just sit there and take phone calls. So we tried to make it easy. Amazon had a lot to do with that, because that's why people buy things from Amazon, because it's easy. So we tried to make it an easy process. And we took that from just very beginnings to where it is now, which we have thousands and thousands of products available to buy.
And tons of articles, Tony's tips articles, which help people
thousands of them
figure out problems and where to put a sender on your ZF transmission.
And we also have an online forum that is also free.
Yep.
That is a wealth of information, because it's not just Tony putting out information. It's guys asking questions in a different format.
Right. That
Tony and other people like Rob Shepis, who's one of our other main contributors,
Rob's great.
Get to interact. And so that community, again, gets to grow, learn. And when you go on the internet and say, why doesn't my engine start? Boom, there's 6 or 7 articles or forum posts that from other guys that experience the same problem, that run through the same troubleshooting steps.
Right.
And voila.
Yeah.
Free information. It's a beautiful thing.
So if you haven't joined our forum, it's free. sbmar.com/community. Totally free. And there's all our information we put out on our website is free. So feel free to search anything. And if you want to search SBMAR and then your search thing. That'll search through all our forum, our Tony's tips, our YouTube videos, all that stuff. Just type in SBMAR and whatever information you're looking for.
That's one of our pitfalls, right? When we go looking for information on the internet about something and we type in, this or that, our articles pop up. We're
I was looking for something else.
Yeah, I was looking for that.
Something more, but good luck.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of how we got to now as far as our internet path. And maybe next time we'll talk about some other facet of how we got to now with Seaboard Marine and Tony Athens.
Tune in.
On this episode, we're going to talk to a couple callers about buying boats.
Dave and Bill.
Yeah.
All right, good.
Hi, welcome to Boat Talk. Who are we speaking with?
Hey, this is David Wool calling from Palisade, Colorado.
How's it going, David?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing today?
Pretty good. How are things out there in Colorado?
Things in Colorado are great. Had some questions regarding potential new boat purchase for myself.
So you're thinking about buying a boat, huh?
Yes, sir. We've been looking at some and just have some general questions on what we should be looking at when it comes to those two big things underneath the salon.
Yeah. Well, the first question for you is: are you nuts?
After the last number of months looking, I think I might be, but it has been fun. So I'm excited about the future.
Yeah. Well, boat ownership is one of those things. It's like you get bit by the bug, and you just have to do it. And it's like it doesn't matter how poor of a financial decision it is, or how in deep you're going to get financially, or what it's going to cost your personal life, and all these other things. You got this vision of being out on the water, and you got to do it. So what are your questions about this new purchase?
So let's look at something specific, and then we'll go into, if time, some other just follow-up questions. So I'm looking at a 2014 Carver that has the QSMs in it, and basically these engines sat for a while, as I understand it, and the owner in 2020, the new owner in 2020, had to have both the aftercoolers fully replaced with new ones. Since that time, no maintenance has been done on the aftercoolers. Should that be a concern? Not a concern? What should we be looking for?
Well, 2020 is not too bad. If the boat sat, that's not the greatest. But this, you said QSM 11s?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's going to be a hard one. If it sat a lot, now, do you know if the boat is freshwater flushed?
No, they are not. We took a look at it, and it does not have freshwater flush on it.
And you're in full salt water?
Yeah, and it is in saltwater full time.
Yeah, so I mean, 5 years is not real bad. The worst part is that they've been sitting. So I mean, if you do buy the boat, you better be prepared. You need to pull those things apart, immediately and do the service. And what you're going to find after 5 years of sitting in salt water, it's hard to say.
Right.
Yeah, the QSM 11 aftercooler is one of the more complex and larger aftercoolers. It's got a clamshell design, and the internal bundle sits horizontally, not vertically. So all of the salt water that's going to remain in there, if there is salt water in there, it's just going to sit there and work its, kind of in attack mode against the dissimilar metals. So it's never a good idea, and this goes for any engine, to let salt water sit in the engines, and it's not a good thing. So Justin's right. The first thing you got to do before you even consider purchasing a vessel is at least try to get some sort of concession for the assessment of the aftercoolers, get them pulled off the engine and opened up, because you won't be able to tell anything until you can actually see inside the internal condition. And then you got to get someone who has a pretty high degree of competence to assess those aftercoolers, right? You could take those aftercoolers to a lot of people and they wouldn't be able to discern one thing from another, in my opinion. So you got to get someone who's pretty knowledgeable about how they're put together and what is considered rough shape and what would be considered, passable.
Now, real quick,
Sure, go ahead.
one easy thing you could do is pull the zincs out. And if the zinc is completely gone and looks like it's been gone for a long time, I mean, that's a bad sign right there, because then you've been sitting in salt water without protection.
Okay, so that brings up, as we talk about it, more questions on it. So I'll call myself an amateur mechanic. I know enough about them to be dangerous, but I don't know enough about them to sit there and diagnose them. So I drop under in the engine compartment there, and you have, whether it be a white, a silver, a yellow, a blue, a red, whatever the engines of choice are sitting in there. What are the top 4 or 5 things to look for before you even get to the potential of an offer and a survey and so on and so forth? What should an amateur like myself be looking for to even say, yes, this is a possibility, or let me run away as fast as I can?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to let Corey answer that question, but before he answers that question, top 4 or 5 things to look at on the engine, I'm going to tell you what I think the top thing you should look at, period, is who the guy selling the boat is. That's the number one thing, because if it's a good stand-up citizen that everybody knows selling a boat versus some deal that sounds a little bit too good to be true from some random boat that nobody knows the history on, that's night and day. So you really gotta look at that. That's the first and foremost thing to think about, because if you're like me, I had a Chevy truck that I recently bought a new Chevy truck. And when it came time to sell my old Chevy truck, I had 3 or 4 or 5 people lining up to buy my old Chevy truck because they know me and they know the history of the truck and all that stuff. So they didn't have to do oil samples or surveys or anything like that, because they know what they're getting just because they know me. So that's the first thing I'd look at, is where's this boat coming from and who's selling it. Now, as far as beyond that, what are you going to look at when you go down to the engine room?
Yeah, I would add to that the first time you're going to walk onto the boat, there's a couple things you're going to want to just look. What's the general condition of the boat, right? Is whoever owned the boat someone who's meticulous? And you should immediately ask for all of the maintenance history, maintenance records. Those, someone with a boat of that size and that expensive should be pretty good at keeping records, and they should be readily available, especially if the boat's up for sale. First thing, right when you get down in the engine room, you're looking for cleanliness. You're looking for how orderly is the boat put together, or is all the wiring, strung nicely? Is everything clean, free of grease, debris? What does it smell like in there, right? And a well-kept engine room, you walk in, you go, wow, you get an automatic impression of how the boat is being maintained. So if you're seeing things like exhaust soot all over the engine and it's not nice and clean, you can kind of extrapolate a little bit further and say that the boat owner is kind of just maybe a weekend warrior, someone who goes, turns the key, hopes it starts, and goes out and burns fuel and puts it away wet, right? So that would be an automatic red flag to me if a boat of that size with engines that are that large and that expensive are not tip-top shape. If someone like me, I would be, very hesitant to even engage further.
Yeah, and you got to do a really good long sea trial. If they're trying to hide something, it'll come out in the sea trial.
100%.
I'm sorry, Corey, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to add one more thing too. It's, as part of the standard process of assessing a vessel that you're going to purchase, you're going to do a lot of things. One of those things is you're going to want to have a survey done. And, surveys are an interesting thing in the boat world, because you have to have a couple things that you have to believe in. Number one, whoever's doing the survey is competent and understands, they may understand boats, but are they familiar with the engines? Are they intimate with the engines and how they work? A lot of engines, and this goes for any engine out there, it goes for Yanmar, Cat, Cummins, a lot of different engines have a lot of different, what I would consider Achilles heels, right? They have things that they're good at, things that they're bad at. And a surveyor that goes out to assess a boat is not going to know that. Okay, just like for example, the QSM11 has a dry manifold, exhaust manifold, and a dry turbo, where all other Cummins engines have coolant-cooled turbos and coolant-cooled manifolds. So this engine is in a different league, so it's very prone to exhaust issues, right? And then we have all these articles and stuff on our website, but a surveyor wouldn't know that. He wouldn't know to look for that specifically. Whereas if you were to call us and say, "What do I look for specifically on a QSM11?"
Right.
That'd be the number one thing. Look for exhaust soot in this area and that area, because I guarantee you, 90% of boats that have QSM11s have either replaced the manifolds in the turbo once, twice, maybe 3 times in their life if they don't prop the vessel properly. And we've seen it for the last, 20 some years since that engine's been made.
Yeah.
Well, and that brings up the next question, and you've already answered a lot of it, is you get to the point where now you need and you look for and you find a mechanical survey person, a quote-unquote a mechanic, someone that works on that specific brand and or engine. what would you expect from him or her? And the example you said, Corey, I think you said earlier that a good long sea trial. This particular survey that I found out in South Carolina basically said I need a full RPM run for a minimum of 30 minutes. Period. No ands, if, ors, or buts about it. So, what would you expect from any surveyor that you hire, a mechanical surveyor, an engine surveyor? What would you expect from him or her before and or after the survey? Because obviously that surveyor is going to make or break the sale in a positive way. Am I buying something good or not?
Yeah. I mean, obviously you should get a nice report that had details all their findings. As far as before, I'm not sure. I would just look for good reviews or a recommendation from, the local. I don't know I wouldn't take I'd be a little skeptical of the surveyor that the yacht broker that you're buying the yacht from recommends.
Yeah,
run away from that guy. But find your own.
That would be the first negative. I mean,
right,
if they say, here, have this guy, know that that's the guy I don't want.
Right. But short of that, it's just a matter of finding somebody reputable. And, I think a lot of this, you got to do a lot of your own homework. The surveyor is going to look at all the general things, but you should do your own homework about whatever engines are in the boat. There's a lot, if it's Cummins related, there's a lot of information on our website. And if it's not, there's just a lot of information all over the internet about all the different engines. So, get on a forum and ask the question and, go in prepared and definitely run the engines hard. You're going to look at the hours and how well the engines run. And, I'm a big believer that a lot of people do these oil samples and stuff. And oil samples, I don't know if we'll get into that right now, but that's kind of a little bit of a witchcraft situation. I mean, it's easy to fake an oil sample.
Well, there's no history. It's like getting your blood drawn once and determining your whole health history
after
with one blood.
After you had a weekend bender.
It doesn't. Yeah, it's like you're gonna die. You're dying. No, it doesn't work that way.
So that's all great information, and always been impressed with. I'll start with Boat Diesel, and I know they're gone now, but Tony was always a contributor to Boat Diesel and read a lot of his articles, and I've read most of the articles now on your site. And so I knew that the earlier versions, that QSM 11, were dry, and that created some issues, and the later versions are wet, and those are a little better. So that was a huge red flag when after I read that article. So that's that.
Just to correct you on one point, it's not about the year of the engine; it's about the horsepower level. It's the 540 above 540,
535,
or 535, 540 is above that is dry.
Still,
still to this day, and below that is wet.
And the wet version is a commercial version, so you wouldn't generally see that version in a boat that you would be looking at.
Right.
Got it. Well, that makes sense too. And so, unfortunately, that boat that we originally started talking about, you guys were spot on in that I walked onto the boat for the first time last weekend, and I'm not sure I was on it for 5 minutes before I walked out and said, we're done.
Yeah.
Because all of the upkeep inside of the boat was very poor, and it went right to your guys' point that if everything isn't clean and organized, you know that the engines aren't going to be that. So we didn't even get into survey because of that.
Right.
Which, I was fine with.
Yeah, that's a wise choice.
Yep. I would definitely go look at a boat first. And obviously sometimes you have to travel and that makes it a little difficult, but I would try to go look at it first yourself before you get the survey, because you might catch something before you get a survey scheduled, I should say, because you might chances are you'll catch something that's a deal breaker before you even get that far. So definitely, do your homework and do what you can. And then the survey, I wouldn't say is a formality because it's really an important step, but that's once you've already kind of said, you know what, I think I might actually buy this boat. Then you get the survey.
Yeah. And I would just,
sorry, Corey, go ahead.
I would just add one more thing. I think it's really important too. You're talking about going out and performing a sea trial. If you're assessing a Cummins engine, I would show up with the sea trial with a printed fuel curve of the engine, and basically have a notepad with me and go out and do the sea trial. You're looking for two things. Number one, is the engine, does it start up right away? Is it easy to start up? Is there a bunch of smoke that comes out? Yes or no? And then with the prop curve in hand, you can actually assess how the engine is propped during the sea trial. And that's what you're looking for. You're buying a boat that already has history, that's already burned fuel, that's already loaded up the engine. So having a fuel curve in front of you, you can tell the boat owner, okay, run at 2,000. And on my fuel curve, it says we're supposed to be burning, 16.1 gallons an hour. Anything over 16.1 gallons an hour at this RPM, which would be considered cruise, would be considered overloaded. And so if you go run the boat and he's burning 20 gallons an hour at that RPM, you have to assume that the boat has been, for however many hours have been on the engine, has also been run at that in an overloaded state. And that would be something that would be a red flag as well, right? Has the engine been loaded properly for however long the engines have been in there, and however many hours those engines have been put under load, right? It's super important.
Fair enough. One more question if you have time.
Sure, one more.
Saltwater, freshwater. How much difference does it make?
Huge.
Yeah, it makes all the difference.
All the difference. And freshwater flushing is a big step in the right direction. But yeah, freshwater is...
A freshwater boat is, we always say if there's a boat, like one you'd be looking for in that range, in that class, it was operated in, let's say, either freshwater or brackish water, that, to me, that's a game changer. That's an automatic, 100% benefit, right? As opposed to a boat that's been operated in the saltwater. And then if it's freshwater flushed in saltwater, right?
Yeah, and I was going to say, that doesn't mean you can't buy a saltwater boat by any means, because if it's everything that we checked off, it's a clean boat, it's not overpropped, it's maintained well, and it's been freshwater flushed, and all the boxes are ticked. I mean, these engines are designed to be run in saltwater. They have heat exchangers, they have saltwater components with zincs and everything. So it's not like you're taking your ski boat and plopping it into the ocean, which destroys it. They're meant for it, but it needs to be maintained. A neglected saltwater boat is bad news. It's really hard to neglect a boat that's meant for saltwater and freshwater.
Yeah, freshwater flushing every time you go out. It's a beautiful thing.
So it's not necessarily a deal breaker. It just you got to be extra vigilant about the maintenance and all that stuff.
Yeah, and I asked that because most of the sizes and types of boats we're looking at, you can find them in freshwater because they're some of the more mass-produced ones. So they're sitting in freshwater as well. Yeah, now there's 10 of them in saltwater to every one in freshwater.
Right.
But the freshwater one is definitely there.
Right. Yeah, and it might be harder to find a deal. Like they might command a premium for a freshwater boat, and so that's something to think about. You got a really good, well-maintained saltwater boat for the right price. There's nothing wrong with that as long as you know what you're getting into, and all the upkeep has been done. So.
Well, you guys, thank you. Congratulations on the new format here. It's wonderful. Look forward to finding the next one and communicating with you guys, getting your suggestions as we look at different ones going forward.
Okay. Well, thanks for calling.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Corey. Thanks, Justin. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, that was a good call.
That's a good call from David.
Yeah. So what can we learn from this when it comes to buying a boat?
Well, David's like a lot of guys out there that are trying to, get into a boat, whether there's someone who's, fresh and never done it before, which has got to be super overwhelming.
Right.
Right. Because there's just a ton of stuff that you don't know. You're going into uncharted territory, no pun intended. Right. But he's like a lot of guys. And, a lot of the points we talked about are super important. Those things that guys don't, they'll engage with a surveyor,
right.
And the surveyor will come out. He's done 120 or maybe 1,200 boats,
right.
And he's going to talk to you like he's super knowledgeable. And he is probably he's probably a boater himself,
right?
But there's a lot of little nuances with boats. I mean, a boat is like a floating RV. There's all these subsystems and all these things, and the engines are probably the most expensive component to that. Would you agree?
Oh yeah.
And so having intimate knowledge of the engine, not just what it's doing, but how is it propped, right? What's the condition of it? An engine is like a book, right? You can read the cover and get an idea,
right.
But until you open it up and look inside, you can't get a real sense of what the condition of this thing you're trying to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on really is.
Yeah.
Is there a piston that's about ready to go?
Right.
You don't know, right? So you have to look at everything that surrounds it and come up with a conclusion based on that.
And I got a little bit of advice because I talk to a lot of guys on the phone about this stuff all the time. And they get the bug and they want to get the boat. And I can tell after I start talking to them that the reason that they're digging in so much to a lot of this stuff is because they're reaching financially, they're extending themselves to get into this boat.
They have the boat disease.
And so they're like, I can't, I'm going to buy this boat, but if the engine blows, that's it. I'll be upside down. I'll be, no pun intended, underwater. And so what I would say is a diesel powered yacht or a diesel powered boat is not for the faint of heart financially.
No.
You got to be ready to have an engine just out of nowhere, throw a rod, and you got to do a long block or a rebuild or whatever, some major component goes bad, a aftercooler or something, and there's $5,000 just like that plus labor.
Well, you got to know that, right? What am I getting into? A lot of guys don't know what they're getting into, and they get a boat with engines that have 5,000 hours on, not knowing that if an aftercooler goes out, that could be $8,000 just in the heart, like you said, and that's. By the way, that's just for the part.
Right.
That's not to take the old one out and put it in. I mean, you could double that depending on what kind of mechanic you find. So you're right. You go in and it's due diligence.
Yeah.
Do all your homework. Find the right boat, but be cautious. Don't step over $1 to pick up a dime either. Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of trade-offs and balancing that need to be assessed.
Yeah. And boating is like, it's one of those things. It doesn't ever make financial sense. It just sucks money. It costs a lot. It's a headache. It's high maintenance. Having a boat in the water, you have to go down and check on it once in a while or pay somebody to check on it. You have to have the bottom scraped. Slip fees. It's just so many headaches. But there's nothing like being out on the water.
I say, are we talking people out of buying boats right now? Let's not do that. We're in the boat business.
But no, when you're out on the water or you're sitting at in, let's say at Catalina or Avalon Harbor, sipping on a nice glass of wine.
So worth it.
The lights, glistening from what's the town there? Not Avalon. Is it Avalon?
It's Avalon.
Avalon, yeah. If that's worth it to you, but you better be ready. If you're like thinking, man, I need to do everything I can to make sure this engine, nothing goes wrong with it, and because I can't afford it, then maybe you should just get like a little gas runabout or go lake boating or something that's a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
So anyway, good call. Thank you very much, David. So should we call William?
We should call William.
Okay. Hi, you're on Boat Talk. Who am I speaking with?
Hey, you're speaking with Bill Whale, Tampa, Florida.
Hi, Bill. How are things down in Tampa? Or up in Tampa. Tampa's kind of north Florida.
Yeah, it's a little warm. How about that?
We'll be out there in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I'll be flying into Tampa in about a month and Corey in about 2 weeks.
Yep.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, welcome. Bring your shorts, flip-flops, and T-shirts.
And bug spray.
And bug spray.
Bug spray.
Yeah.
So what's your question?
Yeah, my question is, I'm in the process of searching for a used Nordic Tug 32. My mission is to do the Great Loop. In my search, what I've discovered is the Nordic 32 was built with several different engine manufacturers and horsepower. I found the following engines: the Cummins QSB 4.2 liter 270, a Cummins 6 BTA 5.9 liter with 270 horsepower. Another Cummins 5.9 liter with 220, a Volvo, and then a Cummins 6B 5.9 liter, also 220 horsepower. And what I want to do is identify the best engine for that particular boat and use that as my filter and looking for it versus finding a boat and then trying to figure out whether the engine is any good.
Yeah. Well, off the top of my head with that list, I would lean towards, but of course I'm partial to Cummins because we're a Cummins dealer. But it's hard to argue with the reliability and simplicity and ease of maintenance and support that you're going to find for the Cummins 12 valve 5.9 210, what we call the 210 or 220 horsepower. That's a really simple bulletproof engine. I mean, it's what kind of put Dodge trucks on the map, and those engines are just bulletproof. But some of those other engines are good engines. The Volvo's a good engine, right? Volvo makes a good engine.
Volvo makes a good engine. I'd go the other way and say, what engines would I want to avoid in a platform like that? If you're evaluating a Nordic Tug, that's a trawler, right? And a trawler has a characteristic of traveling at a slow speed, right? It has a magic happy speed based on how much it weighs. And I guess you would want to assume that a lot of these Nordic Tugs are, let's just say, similar in weight. So let's keep that in control. there's a few engines I would avoid. Now, the Cummins QSD that you're looking at, which is a 4.2 engine.
That's a Cummins Mercury, right?
That's a Mercruiser engine, and that was a collaboration. It's basically an Italian engine. That engine has very little support. Okay,
And it has an outdrive.
yeah, I would steer clear of that engine. And I get a lot of people who have those engines, and we get calls very often because there's no entity out there that knows the engine in great depth and wants to support it for parts and troubleshooting. So that engine would be crossed off my list immediately. When it comes to other engines, let's talk about the other Cummins lineup. I know Nordic Tug, newer Nordic Tugs also have Q Series Cummins, like QSB 6.7s. You can find some out there with QSB 5.9s. The ones you're looking at with a mechanical 6BT 220, that's probably the most favorable engine, and there's a couple reasons why. Number one, it's an absolute workhorse. Okay, you can't kill it. It'd be like talking about a Detroit engine in an old boat. Yeah, they might be messy, but man, you can't kill them, right? It lasts forever. And the same could be said for the 210/220 because it's a non-aftercooled engine. It provides enough horsepower to move the boat at its magic speed in a relatively neutrally loaded condition.
Perfect for a trawler.
Perfect for a trawler, and there's a lot of them out there with it. If it were me, and again, we're biased because we're Cummins people, but that engine would be the one that I would be looking for. As opposed to LDO. Now, you're right. Volvo does make good engines. Now, when it comes to assessing engines, what do I look for? How well is the engine supported? How much, how available are the parts? How expensive are the parts, right? That should be a part of your assessing plan, right?
Do they have a boat talk show to talk about?
Yeah, do they have a boat talk show that talks about the engines? No, but that's a real important factor. You want to make sure if you're going to go on the Great Loop, who are you going to call when you need to troubleshoot an engine issue, and can you get parts for your engine that are readily available?
Yeah,
right. It's important, to have that kind of support for the engine if you're going to go on a trip like the Great Loop, and you'll need it, right? That's a long journey. The Great Loop is, I'm assuming, that's a 6 to 8 month journey, right?
Or more.
Yeah, it's been so fast to go, but you're talking 5,000 to 6,000 miles.
Right.
Right.
It's a long duration, and the speed would be, like you say, about 7 to 8.
Right.
It's nice to be able to get up to run from some weather, but that's not really what I'd be looking at doing on it. It'd be kind of keeping it there. I'm a little confused. It's the 5.9 is listed 2 horsepower, and in fact, you all are using 210, 220, but then I see one that's got 270.
Yeah, so the 270 engine is a 6BTA, and the A stands for aftercooled. The T stands for turboed, right? So the 6BT is just a turboed engine, non-aftercooled. The 260, 270 is what we call a jacket water aftercooled engine.
JWAC.
And
the jacket water aftercooler so that engine can come all the way up to a 370 with a saltwater aftercooler. This sort of this middle of the road engine is the jacket water aftercooler, which basically has what we call a tombstone aftercooler. It sits up on top of the engine, and it cools the charged air from the turbo, but it doesn't cool as much because it uses coolant, which is relatively hot instead of salt water. But that little bit of cooling you get with the coolant allows them to tune up the injection pump a little bit more. You get a little bit more horsepower, but it's really low maintenance because it's just coolant going through the aftercooler. So you basically almost never have to do anything. Now, that said, unless you really have a use for that last little bit of horsepower, honestly, if you had 2 boats and you're like, this boat we love and this boat is okay, I wouldn't let this affect my decision between a 210 and a 250.
Not unless you had some sort of maintenance history issues or something with the engine, right?
Yeah, you're going to have a little bit more top end, just a little bit. You're going to have 50 plus more ponies with the jacket water aftercooled engine. But you also potentially might have to deal with a little bit more maintenance because there is that aftercooler. It can leak and it can be problematic after many thousands of hours, but they're pretty dang reliable and simple. So they're both great. Those are both great engines. They're basically the same engine. It's just you're adding this aftercooler, a little different seawater pump,
and you can burn a little bit more fuel at the same RPM.
Burn a little bit more fuel, same RPM.
Okay, so they're not stressing the internal components by increased turbocharging into the engine.
Well, they are under a little bit more stress, but it's negligible at that. Now, if you go up to a 370,
Okay.
if you go up to a 370, then yeah, you're working the engine considerably harder. And we see guys that have fast planing boats that work their engines hard with a 370 Diamond that don't get the crazy high hours. That you're going to see these trawlers with a 210 that are lugging around at 7-8 knots. You're going to get thousands and thousands and thousands of hours. With a planing boat with a 370 or a couple 370s that push hard and go 25, 30 knots, those engines don't get a lot of hours. And you're right, because it's the same engine, you're just pumping more fuel and air through it and working it harder.
There's more wear and tear.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. When y'all are looking at engines, and I understand maintenance is a big issue, but as far as age of one of these engines, do you look at hours or do you look at fuel burn?
That's Tony's old adage. It's not the amount of hours that the engine has, it's the amount of gallons of fuel you can put through it. So, and that just speaks to exactly what we're talking about. So yeah, you're going to kind of look at both, because unless somebody has really good logs, and you're going to need two boat owners with really good, both of them have to have really good logs to actually have an actual count of the hours on a mechanical engine.
And fuel burn.
Yeah, and fuel burn. Yeah, so I'd go off the hours and how the boat is set up and run. And this goes back to our last caller, who you're buying the boat from. If you're buying the boat from some knucklehead, what's the nut behind the wheel, right? If you're buying it from some knucklehead who's been hard on it and ran it hard, 1,000 or 2,000 hours is a lot different than someone who has babied the engine and taken really good care of it. So, the character and the, reputation of who you're buying the boat from. And I know you don't always, we have to buy boats. Sometimes to find these boats, you have to go across state lines and you have to buy from a broker, and there's all these things. So that can be difficult. But if you can find a boat from somebody who is a good, upstanding citizen, that's always...
Yeah,
tells you a lot.
There's also an age time ratio. I mean, we've seen boats that were built in, let's say, 2000, and only have 350 hours over 20 years, and there's boats that were built in 2000 that have 8,000 hours, right? So there's how much is the engine being used in the amount of time, right? And that gives you a sense of how is the boat being used. Is this guy using the boat, every other Saturday? If he is, how is he treating the engine? Is he just leaving salt water in the engine throughout that time, or is he freshwater flushing the engine? Right? And if he's in salt water, and that will tell you, obviously engines that sit for long periods with salt water in them tend to do worse than engines that are used more often. And right, obviously, and then freshwater flushing goes leaps and bounds beyond that if you're freshwater flushing the engine.
Yeah.
Oh, that's helpful. That's helpful there. As far as reliability, performance, and parts availability, and dealer support are things that are obviously very important. I guess ease of the owner working on the engine too. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So we've dealt with a lot of engines. We put a lot of different engines in boats. We put Caterpillars, Volvos, Yanmars, Cummins, and that's a really great question. If you're looking at a Nordic tug, this is a single engine vessel, so you're assuming that there's a pretty decent amount of room around the engine. I would say, seeing the engines that I've seen, that depending on what engine it is, Cummins engines seem to be very straightforward to work on. They're inline six engines, getting access to things like the hang-on components, heat exchangers, alternators, starters.
The only bugger is the seawater pump.
Seawater pump on a B can be a little difficult depending on how it's mounted.
Mechanical B seawater pump can be kind of a pain. We have a little spacer, but you're right. The rest of the components are kind of accessible. And I've done a lot of exhaust for Nordic tugs, and I've seen a lot of pictures of engine rooms, and I think they generally have decent access on the side. I think they're below a deck, right? So there's not a lot of height above it, so you're kind of squashed. It's good if you're not too tall, or if you're good at being on your knees or whatever. But But there's some decent room on the side, which is really important. You get a pad down there, or a blanket, or a moving blanket, or something where you can lay down and get comfortable, and you should be able to get to most of the stuff on the side of the engine, which is where everything is.
All right. Now, if you compare and contrast the Cummins engine with the Volvo or Yanmar, I would argue that the Cummins engines are a little bit easier to work on. The Yanmars and Volvos tend to be a little bit more of what I consider like a form factor engine. They're smaller in stature, right? And
Compact.
some of them have different orientations. They may not be inline six. And the components are a little bit more packed into the engine and probably would cause a little bit more grief if you had to get in there and work on it while the engine was in the boat. Now, would it be a deal breaker one from another? I'm not really sure. I mean, obviously, again, we're Cummins people. I would rather work on a 6 BTA as opposed to a Volvo, D4 or something like that.
It doesn't get a lot simpler than a 6 BTA. And some of these other engines might be a little bit smaller displacement and similar horsepower, but then they might be aftercooled. And you'd be better off going with the straight 6 non-aftercooled. That's just a huge headache you don't have to deal with. Just go on our website and look up all about aftercooler maintenance and all the pictures and stuff. And if you can get away from an aftercooler, that's real nice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's when it says BT versus BTA. The A is meaning aftercooler.
Yeah, and that kind of excludes that 270. That 270 is an exception because that's saltwater aftercooled. So that engine's okay. But
Jacket water.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, JWAC, jacket water aftercooled.
Right.
But, yeah.
Okay. How do y'all? I know the manufacturer provides recommended spare parts, but I guess y'all got a lot of experience. And did y'all ever, had an owner say, "Hey, this is the engine. You're Cummins people. What spare parts would you recommend if you're doing a great loop?"
We actually covered that one. We covered that one in our last episode. So we'll send that to you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll send that to you soon. It'll be going live here in a couple weeks. So we'll send that to you.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate it, guys. It's been very helpful, and appreciate the insight there. And now my search will commence with a little different attitude.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, good luck. Be prepared. Owning a boat's a big thing. But the Great Loop is we had some good friends from Florida that just recently did the Great Loop
Out of Crystal River.
Yeah, Chris and Beth.
Yep.
Oh, Chris River. Yeah. That's, you're you know a lot of places in Florida for being from California.
Well, they got a house out there, so yeah, awesome. Well, thanks for the call.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. We appreciate you calling in.
All right.
Thank you very much for the information. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. So what can we learn from that call, Corey?
Well, again, when you're assessing different boats that have different engines, you have to assume that the characteristics of the boat are going to be very similar. In other words, one's not going to weigh 4 tons more than the other. So when you talk about the amount of horsepower required to move the boat, it would be prudent to get out there, maybe get involved in a forum and see how others are propping the boats.
Right.
And
we talked about that in our last episode.
Right. What
too.
seems to be the most efficient?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, you can put a lot of different engines into there, right? But you want to find an engine that's easy to maintain, easy to work on, right? That's going to provide the amount of horsepower that's required, but not have to have all those extra things that require more maintenance intervals, right? Like aftercoolers and things.
Right.
And then when you work backwards from there and say, okay, most of these guys are running between 23 and 25 inch props, and they tend to burn this fuel at this RPM, and then you kind of have a baseline, right? And now you're looking at what engine really fills that role, but it's going to provide all that value, right?
Yeah, and when it comes to selecting an engine, I don't ascribe to the theory that it's always, I don't just always say Cummins.
Sure.
Because like Frank has a little Yanmar in his boat.
Yanmar's a great engine.
And, for what he does on a planing boat, this 24-foot skipjack has been extended to 26, I think. A little bit heavy for a skipjack because but he just goes out to the islands and back about an hour or two each way.
Sure.
A weekend type boat. And that little Yanmar is really smooth.
And he freshwater flushes.
He flushes.
Maintains the engine.
Yep.
And the engine's taking care of him.
Yeah. And not tons of hours. And the Yanmar is real smooth and quiet, and it's great for an application like that. But it is hard to get parts. So there's always little trade-offs,
Little trade-offs.
But he doesn't need a lot of parts because he didn't put a lot of hours on. But a guy like this doing the Great Loop, I mean, you can't go wrong with a 6BT 210. It's the simplest, most bulletproof engine.
Think about that. Think about resale value.
Yep.
You're going to resell the boat. Now you have another guy that's going through the same process as
Right.
Bill,
Yep.
who says, I've heard a lot of good things about this particular engine platform and this particular boat.
Right.
Now the value stays up.
Yep. All right, it's time for our segment Between Two Sterns. You ready for this one?
I'm so ready.
Now, this week I have just a cheesy pirate joke. This one actually comes from Zach, our old buddy, one of my best buds from back in middle school. We go way back.
This is going to be good.
He told me this years ago. But I'm hoping that we get some more submissions from you guys. So if you have any ideas for a good little funny story or bit for this segment called Between Two Sterns, boat talk at sbmar.com.
Does it have to be clean?
BOAT. Clean enough for YouTube, whatever that is. I mean, this isn't a kid's show.
Let's not break any rules, but you can get a little edgy.
Right.
Okay.
That's BOATTALK at sbmar.com.
Boat talk.
At sbmar.com.
All right. Send them in.
So here's the joke. So this sailor walks into a bar.
Ouch.
Yeah. And he sees this old salty sea pirate sitting at the bar, right? And the guy's the typical pirate. He's got a peg leg and a hook and an eye patch. So he's like kind of intrigued. So he goes and sits down next to him, has a couple drinks, and they get to talking. He gets up the courage to finally ask him, so what happened to your leg? How'd you get the peg leg? He goes, we had a big squall and I got washed overboard. And just as the crew was pulling me aboard ship, a shark came up and bit my leg off. He goes, oh man, that's crazy. That's crazy, man. That's a crazy story. They drink a little bit more and he goes, well, so how about the hook? How'd you get the hook? He goes, well, we were boarding a ship to do some pillaging and plundering, and swords were flying and guns were ablazing, and in all the chaos, my hand got chopped off. I go, oh, wow, that's crazy. Well, what about the eye? He's like, well, one day a seagull landed up in the crow's nest and dropped one right in the eye. He goes, you lost your eye from seagull poop? He goes, no, it was the first day with me new hook.
All right, pretty good.
So if you got ideas for a joke for Boat Talk, email us, boattalk@sbmar.com.
I like it.
All right, well, thanks for listening to Boat Talk. If you'd like to be a guest on Boat Talk, email us at boattalk@sbmar.com.
Send those emails in.
Yeah. And
We need more content.
We'll be back soon with another episode unless, what?
Unless something horrible happens, I get hit by a bus, I guess. I don't know. If you have any suggestions or any content, any questions that you got, please send an email to boattalk@sbmar.com, and hopefully we'll put it on our show.
Yeah, or if you'd like to be a caller or a guest or whatever. Yeah.